Great. I think we're ready to begin. So first, I would just like to say welcome to our reopening of schools family webinar for our Innovation Tech program, which is part of our Innovative Education department here at OCM BOCES. We really appreciate you participating tonight. I know it's a beautiful night in Central New York, so being on a webinar is probably one of the last things you want to do. But we certainly, find it important for you to be able to participate and for us to be able to share our most up-to-date reopening plans with you and get any feedback that you might have. So again, welcome. We go to the next slide here. So we are conducting this webinar tonight through Zoom webinar, and we're going to be talking more about those features in a moment. But before we do that, I would like to just provide an introduction of myself. My name is Eric Comtois. I'm the director of our Career and Technical Education Programs and Innovative Education Programs here at OCM BOCES. And joining me is Mrs. Belanger, so I'll allow her to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gretchen Belanger, principal here at Innovation Tech. I do thank you so much for taking your time to be with us tonight.
So Gretchen and I will be taking turns going back and forth as we present tonight. A little bit more about Zoom webinar. So first, we're starting as close to 5 o'clock as we can. Again, if you logged on a little bit early, I appreciate you sitting tight as we had other participants logging on. We will respect the start time and the end times of this program. So we'll end close to 6 o'clock, or if we end a little bit earlier, that might happen as well. As questions come up throughout, so as you're listening and looking at our slides, you might have some clarifying questions that are needed. Please write them in the Q&A section at the bottom. So there should be a button at the bottom that says Q&A. We just ask you to click on that. And when you submit a question or a comment, that will only go to our panelists. Other participants will not see, and other participants are not able to see or hear you. So at any time, use that chat feature at the bottom or the Q&A feature just to let us know if you're unable to hear or see us at any time. So our agenda for today, let's review. We're going to be reviewing the OCM BOCES school reopening plan. You may have seen this through our website. This is the plan that we have to submit to New York State for approval. So we'll be looking a little bit at that. Of course, we'll be talking about health and safety procedures that are in place through all of our programs at OCM BOCES, in particular at Innovation Tech. We'll talk a little bit about the work we've done in the building around classroom arrangements and procedures. And then, of course, what students can expect. So when they walk in the door on that first day, what's different, and how can we help them navigate this different environment? Preparing your child for reopening, what can you do to best help support your child as we look to re-enter school? And then, of course, instructional practices. We have in-person and remote options. So what will those look like? Halfway through, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ms. Belanger, and then I will be monitoring the question and answer section. So you can submit at any time, but just know that we're going to be collecting these and looking at them and then addressing them as we are able towards the end. If there's a question that might be particular to your student or child, we may just hang on to that and contact you outside of the webinar. Or if there are enough questions where we can't address them all, again, we would be reaching out to you to answer those going forward. So as I mentioned before, you may have seen this document on our OCM BOCES website at ocmboces.org/reopening2020. So this is where you will find the 2020 reopening plan. This is the plan that was submitted through New York State and covers all aspects of reopening, and we'll be reviewing those in a few moments here as well. It's just important to note that when we developed this plan, these plans were due at the end of last month, beginning of August. Since then, we've been tasked with now finding plans and for implementing these plans. So as we have gone along, these plans have shifted, and we're updating these as we go and as we get closer to reopening. So these are all the considerations that had to be made when crafting that reopening plan. Everything from communication and community engagement, which this session webinar is part of, down to health and safety, facilities, and I won't read them all, but you can see the other things that we must take into account for students as we re-enter: the social emotional well-being, special education services, attendance, and technology and connectivity. So all of those are part of that reopening plan. Again, we're not going to review each one of these considerations tonight. If you'd like further information on the plan, it is available on our website, as we just showed you. Very important to note at the bottom that all OCM BOCES student programs, and we are very excited to be able to offer this, are offered in person 5 days per week. And this is in compliance with the CDC and Department of Health guidelines. We are also offering an all remote instruction option. So if you choose that option, your child would be learning remotely for at least the beginning of the school year. One of the first items that we will cover is in relation to health and safety. Obviously, this is a large consideration when we welcome our students and staff back into our programs. So in the next several slides, we're going to be reviewing all of those health and safety features. Again, if you have any questions or you need clarification, please put those in the chat. There will be a lot of information here, so I'll try to move through carefully but swiftly. So again, if you need me to slow down, just put that in the chat. So the first item we'll cover is our protocols for cleaning. So obviously we have a normal routine for cleaning, but in addition to that normal routine, we're going to be cleaning those high touch areas. So when you think about tabletops, doorknobs, areas that would be touched multiple times by students and staff throughout the day, those will have the opportunity to be cleaned and disinfected multiple times throughout the day. All cleaning products that we have and that we will have access to throughout the school year are approved by the CDC and the EPA for disinfecting COVID-19. We've also purchased as an organization several Clorox 360 sprayers, and those will also be used for disinfecting daily. Bathrooms will be cleaned, obviously, as those are the high touch area, will be cleaned at least 3 times per day. So we will have custodial staff available throughout the day to clean those spaces. Moving on with health and safety procedures, as an organization, we have decided to conduct daily temperature screenings. So those will be conducted and administered to all students upon arrival to the school. So that is in all of our OCM BOCES programs. This is also in addition to the evaluation that you will go through for your component school district. So the school districts will be asking you to evaluate your child's health each day before sending them to school, whether that's on the bus or if they have contact at the home school district. So our protocol for temperature screenings are in addition to any protocols that happen in your district. We have been hard at work this summer developing informational materials regarding COVID-19 symptoms. Those symptoms are all listed in that reopening plan. And of course, those will be communicated as we approach the school year and as the school year gets underway. Included in that is a collection of health and safety videos that will be made available to you to help support at home the practices that we're reinforcing at school and also to educate you on those practices. Students and staff members exhibiting symptoms. So we'll get into a little bit about what is the protocol if someone were to be sick or exhibit symptoms at school. So any student who is exhibiting symptoms during the school day will be sent to the health office for an assessment by the school nurse. And through that assessment, if there's any student or staff member with a temperature of 100 degrees Fahrenheit or greater, we've decided that they should not be in school. And that, again, follows all of the health and safety guidelines. We talked a little bit about the screening questionnaires that will be used, not just to determine if a student is sick through screening, but also if they've experienced any symptoms in the recent past, if they've been exposed or tested positive for COVID-19, or have traveled to a location that would be on that travel advisory list. So for students that do exhibit COVID-19 symptoms, you will be contacted to pick up your child and instructed to contact your healthcare provider. So that follow-up is necessary and important. So in parentheses here, it is very, very important to us to note that we have your accurate contact information and that we have that on file. So you may be accustomed to getting that information at the beginning of every school year and asking to make sure that that's accurate. This year, it's more important than ever to make sure that we have that contact information. So we recommend that you reach out to school. We'll be contacting you just to make sure that that is on file. It will be essential that if you are contacted to pick up your child because of symptoms, that they are picked up immediately. So if you think about others in your family who might be on that contact list or those that you may need to add, it's important for us to have that so that they could, be available to come pick up your child. And that is for the safety of them and for the safety of others in the school community. Contact tracing. For students who exhibit symptoms and they are seen by a care provider, that care provider will determine if a COVID-19 test is necessary. So that's an important piece. If there are symptoms, they must be monitored or they must be assessed by an outside healthcare provider. If a COVID-19 test by that healthcare provider is deemed not necessary, the following must take place in order for your child to return to school. So they must have no fever without the use of fever-reducing medicine, and they must have felt well for 24 hours. Aside, the student will need a doctor's note stating that he or she is cleared to return to school. The protocols for a student who tests positive for COVID-19 are as follows. That student must stay home for at least 10 days since the first symptoms. It has been at least 3 days since the student had a fever without those medicines again. And it's been at least 3 days since the student's symptoms improved, including cough and shortness of breath. Additionally, they would need an order of release from the health department. It's important to note that if there is a positive case for COVID-19, we work very closely with the County Department of Health to identify tracing needs and for any decisions that would be made around the school. This slide talks about the tracing process in our county. So if there's a confirmed case of a student in our program, we are going to work, as I said, directly with the health department for contact tracing. The contact tracer, which is based on interviews, identifies who needs to be in that 14-day quarantine as identified here on this slide. Even if that person who was issued the 14-day quarantine tests negative, the person will need to complete that 14-day quarantine. On a different note here, the Onondaga County Health Department has said they will be providing mobile testing sites at different districts around Onondaga County. This might have been something you heard in the news recently, so that staff and high school students who want to get tested can do so voluntarily. Again, this testing would be voluntary at this point. Also during the school year, the Onondaga County Department of Health has indicated they will conduct surveillance testing at various schools across Onondaga County. Surveillance testing is basically a saliva collection by swabbing a person's mouth, and that surveillance testing involves taking the saliva samples from 12 people, which you might have heard recently as pool testing, and running the test of 12 samples to see if anyone in that group tested positive. If there is a positive result or a positive test from that pool testing, it'd be requested that the 12 individuals get tested diagnostically. This allows the Department of Health to determine if a group of people, if COVID-19 is present within a group of people. This would not be completed without parent permission. It's important to note. Our next slide talks about our health and safety supplies that we have on hand and what is expected for students as they return. So the first item here is face covering protocol, sorry. Approved masks must cover nose and mouth, and the school is required to have masks available to those students or staff that may not have one. So we'll talk more about that when we get into instruction and what is expected when wearing masks in school. Cleaning and sanitizing supplies, including disinfecting wipes and cleaners, will be present in all school spaces, whether those are common areas or whether those are directly in the classroom, and teachers will have those available to them as well. Hand sanitizer will be available in all instructional spaces, and students, and this is important, will be educated and encouraged to regularly use proper hand washing and respiratory hygiene throughout the school day. Finally, OCM BOCES, again, has and will continue to make educational materials that will support and promote health and safety in our school. What we have done is we have worked with our organization to create some signs that we are currently hanging in the school now in different spaces. So these are some examples of those signs. It's important to note that any guests or visitors to the school will be asked to immediately register and complete that COVID screening questionnaire at reception. Important to note that we'll also be limiting the number of visitors that are in our school. We'll be educating students on proper disposal and storage of their PPE. course, we'll be talking about hand washing as frequently as possible and maintaining social distancing by staying 6 feet apart at all times. We'll be educating students and giving them reminders on ways that we can avoid the spread of germs. And then, of course, the wearing of a mask will be important at all times when moving throughout the building. When we talk about our instructional spaces, and I'm actually joining you live now from one of our classrooms at Innovation Tech that is set up for socially distanced instruction, students will have individual workspaces distanced by 6 feet. Students and staff must wear a face covering in all school settings at all times. Mask breaks will be provided when eating or drinking or when it's appropriate, but this would be on a limited basis. So there would be no time when a student would enter a classroom and sit at a desk and they would just be allowed to take off their mask for the entire period. Those would have to be prescribed mask breaks within our school day. Also, our hallways are reconfigured when possible to allow for safer flow in one-way direction when possible. When we talk about sanitizing our school, the custodial staff will disinfect and sanitize each area daily. Hand sanitizer will be available and hand washing will be encouraged once again. Staff will have access to disinfecting supplies to use between classes, and drinking fountains have been covered so they'll not be able to be used as normal, but bottle filling stations are still open and accessible. We just ask that students bring in their own water bottles and that they are labeled, and of course that they're not sharing those items. So at this time, I'm going to pause and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Belanger. I'll give you a reminder that at the bottom you have the Q&A feature. If you have any questions or comments, please click on Q&A, type them in, and I'm going to take some time now to review any questions that have come in. So Ms. Belanger, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as you know, the best way to help your child is for us to be partners and to work together. So first, I'd like to just talk about a few things that you can do at home to help prepare your child to be successful here at school. Of course, we want to be positive and reassuring. Speak to your student about the new rules and the way that our new normal, how things will be here at Innovation Tech. Reinforcing the hand hygiene, washing, and the use of sanitizer. Hand sanitizers at school and of course at home. Throughout the day, we are going to be limiting the transitions through the school, and of course reminding your child about the expectations of masks. So the mask should cover both their mouth and their nose. It's important to be able to for your child to be able to wear the mask for a long length of time. So that could be something that you could practice at home and then talk to them about the mask breaks that we will be having. So our teachers have been busy over the summer making masks for our students. They have been successful at making over 500 masks. So that is going to be an option that we just wanted to do something for each of our students. So here's an example of some of them that were made. This is an example of what a hallway might look like. I think this isn't one of ours, but we are going to be maintaining social distancing in the hallway in all settings throughout the school. Like Mr. Comtois said, one-way traffic when possible in the hallways. And then we just ask that you continue to share and discuss resources with your child at home. This is another picture of a classroom here at Innovation Tech with the proper distancing. It's all facing the same direction, which is a little bit different than we've had in the past. The space has been maximized to make sure that we can safely fit students into each classroom. Hand sanitizer will be in each classroom. Students are expected to use their own individual supplies and not be sharing equipment in any way. Our windows will be open when possible to provide ventilation in each of the classrooms. So here's just a few things that students can expect from in school for our instructional practices. Breakfast and lunch will be served at staggered times to allow for social distancing. Our arrival and dismissal time will also be staggered, certainly the arrival time so that we have the opportunity to do our temperature screening. And of course, whenever possible, we're going to be limiting the transitions throughout the building, and that includes visitors in the building. Our PE classes are going to be outside as much as possible. And then when they do need to be in the gymnasium, students will be 12 feet apart and will not be able to share any of the equipment. For our in-person learning, students and staff will follow the social distancing practices in the classrooms and the common areas. Just like normal, actually, with Innovation Tech, we're going to be teaching our students about the instructional technologies that we use so that we're all set in the event of a closure. We're going to continue to use Echo and the Google Suite and maybe even learn some more digital platforms in the classroom that will only enhance your child's learning. And then students will continue to have their individual device to be able to use throughout the day. For our remote instruction, there is an expectation for substantial interaction between the teachers and students. Attendance will be taken regardless of if the instruction is remote or in person, and that's per New York State Department of Education. We will be using Google Meets and Zoom to provide the video lessons and conferencing with teachers. That will be office hours, will be through the Google Meets and Zoom. And then instructional objectives will be the same, whether students are in person or remote, so that we can make sure that we ensure equity of learning for all students. If students are not in attendance on a regular basis for remote instruction, then we will be contacting parents and the school to ensure that everyone is okay, that our students, if there's any support that's needed for the student, so that they can be successful. If a student does choose remote learning, then they will need to remain on remote learning for the same timeline as their individual home district. And then our remote instruction plans will be continued to be developed and communicated with you as they come along. Okay, I think we're ready for some questions.
So we covered a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time, but we are getting some great questions that are starting to come in. So as you kind of process the information that you've heard so far, please take a moment. And if you have questions, put them in the Q&A at the bottom. And in a moment, I will start to begin reading some of those and providing some answers. So one of the first questions we received was, how will social distance happening? Well, how will it happen on the bus? And that is a great question. We're currently working with our school districts and our partners in the transportation departments at those districts. You know, they have a big task of identifying and assessing the enrollment of those students who are riding, but there is guidance around wearing a mask and social distancing, which will limit the capacity on the bus. Your district will be in touch regarding transportation plans in the coming weeks. If you have any specific questions or, you know, for us, you can reach out to us and we can help facilitate that conversation with districts. The next question, will teachers move or students when switching classes? And that is a great question. When available and when appropriate, we would have teachers moving to different classes. Now that's in a high school setting, you can see that that's not always an option, but when we are transitioning, we're doing things with our schedule to try to stagger dismissal or transition times so that all students from the building wouldn't be in the hallway at once. And then moving to that next classroom space in an orderly fashion with that traffic flow that Mrs. Belanger talked about. Next question, will students still receive laptops? Yes, students will be administered their own individual laptops that they can use for instruction. Again, we just ask that students use those laptops individually and that they're not sharing with others. The next question was around lunchtime, around where and how many students for lunch. Again, we're currently in the implementation planning of our reopening plans. So that's something that we're currently working on. So there's nothing necessarily set in stone about, you know, timing and where that will all occur. But Mrs. Belanger and I had a conversation earlier today. So I don't know if you wanted to share anything about thoughts for lunch.
We are going to be able to serve lunch following the social distance guidelines. And then we believe that we are going to be able to have everyone either eat in the working half in the working cafe and half in the art room. And then switch with family group, that we have enough seats socially distanced to be able to do that.
There was a question that just came in that I think is relevant to talking about technology. What size are the MacBooks that are issued?
Ooh.
Oh, might have to get back to you on that
I
one.
can get back to you on that.
Okay, great. We'll save that one. The next question was how many students per class, and that is dependent on the size of the classroom. So one of the things that we did first, even prior to our reopening planning, was to assess every classroom space that we have and identify if we have 6-foot distancing, how many students could safely fit in those spaces. So on average, our classrooms at Innovation Tech are probably in between the 14 and 20 range in terms of capacity for students. Again, that's solely dependent on the size of the class. And again, the arrangement would be all of our students' desks or tables in this case are facing the same direction in the classroom. Our next question, what will be the criteria when students will not have to wear a mask? Assuming this will not go on forever, will it have to be advised by the governor that masks will no longer need to be worn? The answer to that question is, students are expected to wear a mask at all times in all school settings. Of course, you've heard the term mask breaks and what that will look like. The criteria for when students would not have to wear a mask or when they'd be provided that mask break is when the teacher or administrator, whoever is working with the students, can assume that 6-foot distancing. So 6-foot distancing, social distancing will be important criteria when identifying when a mask break would be provided. Again, that mask break would not be prolonged. It would be a limited break, and then students would be required to put the mask back on. Our next question, if students start the year in person, do they have the option to go remote after the year has begun? So the answer to that question, again, we work closely with our district partners, but the answer to that question would be yes. If a student started in person, they would be able to choose remote. The opposite, however, would not be allowed going from remote to in person until that timeline that the district has set up is met. So many districts are choosing either a quarter or a semester in order to make that option. Another question that came in, if the home district says that students are on a 2-day in-person and 3-day virtual, will they still provide transportation 5 days a week? So the answer to that is yes. We have worked very closely throughout this process with our districts to provide transportation to Innovation Tech 5 days per week. Another question that just came in now, is there any information on Regents testing? Will it take place this year? So as of right now, we're preparing students for instruction that they will be taking the Regents. As further guidance comes out, or if that changes, we would be, we'd be in touch about that. So at this point, that has covered all the questions that have come in. I will give you a moment if you have any other questions to put those in. One just came in. It says there's been a lot of talk about once there is a positive case in a school, the school will go all remote. As I noted earlier, if there is a positive case in the school, we work very, very closely with the Department of Health to make those decisions. We would not be making decisions on whether a school were to close. That would be decisions that we'd be making with guidance from the Department of Health. Question says, if all families choose in person, will that change the plan? We were very lucky in that when we assessed all of our spaces, this was an important part of our decision making when discussing and creating our reopening plan, that we can accommodate all students for in-person learning this school year. Obviously, we need that information for our best planning for instruction, whether that be in person or remote. So one of the things here before we do end, we're going to be prompting you to make those decisions soon, so it would allow us the opportunity to best plan for instruction for the upcoming school year. One more question that just came in. It says, is the start date for school still September 8th? Great question, as many districts are looking to push back the start date in order to provide more time for staff to prepare. At this time, we are looking to have instruction start one day later on September 9th. This will be going to the Board of Education for approval this week, but that is the heads up on the date of September 9th for our start date. Question came in, a follow-up to that question: what if the home district does not start until the 14th? Another great question. That would be most likely the district would not transport our students until that start date. So we'd want to communicate and verify that with our districts. But if a student were not to start until the 14th, then the intention would most likely be that our students would not be coming to us through any of our BOCES programs until that date. If you would like to send anyway, even if transportation is not available, we will be open on the 9th. So if you can provide transportation prior to that date, we would certainly appreciate that. We'll just give another few seconds here to see if any other questions come in. Question just came in. So this is all still in a proposal stage. When will it be finalized? So it is assumed that our plans, when they are submitted, are approved unless we hear otherwise in terms of feedback. So all of the topics and considerations that we covered today, we're acting as if we're going forward with these considerations for the reopening planning of schools. Of course, as guidance comes out, as sometimes it comes out, by the day, then we would adjust our plan as necessary based on that guidance from the health department or the state education department. So as I'm not seeing any more questions, we can flip to the last slide. Again, if you have any questions that may be specific to your child, please reach out to the school and we can provide you with our best answers to those questions. You can either reach out to Mrs. Belanger directly or you can reach out to me. I think my contact information was on the letter that went home, so please feel free to reach out. Also on this last slide, it says, please contact the school. Again, if you have questions. Another important note if you need to update your contact information, it's important that you do that with us so that we can have that readily available as needed. Or if you've yet to confirm in-person or remote instruction. So if you have not made that decision yet, we do ask that you notify us by next Wednesday, August 26th. That will allow us time to make our plans for in-person and remote instruction. There will be, if you have not made that decision yet, we are assuming in person, and you'll be getting a letter home if we have not heard from you or we haven't been able to reach you. And that will just be asking you just here what's listed to please notify us by August 26th. Mrs. Belanger, I don't know if you have anything else to add to our session.
I just thank everyone for coming and that we appreciate that we can work together to make this a successful year.
I agree. I appreciate your participation today. This is really an important part of our process, and it's going to be important that we stay in touch as we go towards our reopening planning, and we will have further communication with you. Again, I want to thank you. I hope you're able to enjoy your evening, and thank you very much.
Thank you.